buckle up because we're diving into a world,
most people don't even realize existed.
Okay.
Ever heard of hand painting?
Yeah.
Individual frames of a movie just to get a splash of color.
Wow.
Get ready to have your mind blown because today's deep dive is all about the surprisingly complex history of color in film.
And joining me, as always,
Yes.
is our color guru.
Absolutely.
Ready to make sense of it all.
You know, you bring up a good point.
Most folks think it was all black and white and then bam, technicolor.
Right.
But the journey to those vibrant images we associate with classic films...
It's way more experimental.
Yeah.
And honestly, more fascinating than people realize.
Right. Like before I started digging into this.
I totally thought technicolor was the be-all, end-all.
Right.
But then I'm reading about hand coloring stencils. Even dyes that worked best on certain fabrics.
Wow.
It's like stepping into a time machine where art met science.
Yeah.
In ways most of us never even think about.
It's true, and it wasn't just about...
Trying to capture what we see in real life.
This is where things get really interesting. The Color Mania text dives into this idea of autonomous versus mimetic color.
Okay.
It's like, think about those old hand-tinted postcards. Sometimes they were going for realism, but other times it was all about adding color for mood or to highlight something specific.
That's the autonomous side.
Wow, so it's like sometimes color was its own storytelling tool.
Not just trying to copy what the camera saw.
Exactly. And those early filmmakers, they were limited by the technology of the time, but that forced incredible creativity.
Speaking of limitations.
There's this whole other concept in Color Mania that blew my mind. Material aesthetics.
Okay.
Like, it's not just the dyes they used.
But the actual film stock itself becoming part of the artistic equation.
You got it.
It's like, imagine the film is another character in the movie, and it has a personality.
Yeah.
Early film stock often had this warm, almost amber tone that wasn't always intentional. It's just how the chemistry worked back then.
Wait, instead of those warm, nostalgic colors we associate with old movies.
Weren't always the director's choice. It was the film itself having its say.
That's wild. You're catching on.
And it affected everything.
Okay.
Think about it.
If you know certain colors will pop more because of how the film reacts to them, that influences your set design, your costumes.
Yeah.
It's like a whole secret language between the filmmakers, the film, and the audience.
Yeah.
No wonder those early films feel so unique.
There's this whole hidden layer of meaning baked right in.
You mentioned costumes. Was it really that big of a deal, like certain fabrics looking better
Oh, absolutely.
in those early color processes than others?
This wasn't just some happy accident. Certain dyes worked best with specific materials. So imagine you're a costume designer in the 1910s.
Okay.
And you're working on a film using, say, Pathicolor.
Pathicolor.
Sounds fancy.
It was pretty groundbreaking for its time.
They use stencils, almost like incredibly intricate coloring book pages to add color to films.
Whoa, talk about painstaking work.
What? Go on, you were saying costumes and Pathicolor.
Right. So you're that costume designer and, you know, a certain shade of red just won't show up well with Pathicolor. Suddenly your fabric choices are limited by the technology. But clever folks that they were.
Those early filmmakers, they turned limitations into opportunities.
So instead of seeing it as a restriction, they used it to fuel their creativity.
I like that.
Exactly. A great example of this is the 1927 film Casanova, which used Pathicolor extensively.
Wow.
The costumes are incredibly detailed with vibrant colors and intricate patterns, but if you look closely, you'll notice they favored certain shades and fabrics that worked best with the Pathicolor process. They were working within those constraints to create something visually stunning.
Okay, this is already blowing my mind, and we haven't even gotten to Technicolor yet.
And that's a whole other story for another time.
But the key takeaway here is that color in those earliest days of film, it was a collaboration, a dance between artistic vision, scientific limitations, and the very materials they were using. It's a far cry from clicking a button on a computer, wouldn't you say?
No kidding. But this all begs the question.
When did things start to change? When did color on film go from this almost magical experimental process
to the Technicolor world we often associate with classic movies?
Well, let's talk about that. Technicolor might be the name that comes to mind for most people.
But even their journey to color dominance was filled with its own set of hurdles and triumphs.
We've been talking about all those
pioneers of early film color, those almost forgotten techniques.
Right.
But let's be honest, so the name that probably popped into your head.
When we started this whole conversation was Technicolor.
Yeah.
It's almost synonymous with those classic vibrant films, right?
You say Technicolor, And people instantly picture Dorothy stepping into Oz or Gene Kelly singing in the rain.
It's iconic.
It really is. But like you were saying before,
Before we took a break, even Technicolor's journey.
wasn't exactly a straight shot to success.
Not at all. In fact, before they landed on the process that made them famous,
Right.
Technicolor went through their own share of experimentation. Remember how we talked about two-color processes earlier?
Right, like how Technicolor initially used only 2 strips of film.
To create their color.
Exactly. Technicolor, no. Furor, as it was called,
Okay.
was their most successful 2-color system. And don't get me wrong, it produced some beautiful results.
But it wasn't until they introduced the 3-strip process with Technicolor, no, 4.
As things really took off.
3 strips. I tried wrapping my head around that earlier.
Can you even imagine back then?
Dealing with 3 separate strips of film.
To create one color image.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? Imagine this, they had these massive cameras.
That were basically 3 cameras in one gen. When you filmed, the light was split, and each of those 3 strips of black and white film
Wow.
captured a different color record, red, green, and blue.
Okay, so far so technical.
But how did they go from those separate strips to the final?
Glorious Technicolor we know and love.
That's where the magic really happens.
Remember how we talked about dye transfer
Yeah.
with those early color processes? Well, Technicolor took it to a whole new level of precision.
Okay.
They'd use those 3 strips of film to create something called dye transfer matrices. It sounds complicated.
But think of it like creating a mold for each color.
A mold. Okay, now that's an analogy I can get behind.
Right. So you have your red mold.
Your green mold, your blue mold. And then they'd use those molds to physically transfer the dyes.
Onto the final film print. It was a painstaking process.
Wow.
But the results were unlike anything else at the time. Those vibrant, saturated colors.
Just leaped off the screen.
And that's the Technicolor look everyone instantly recognizes, isn't it?
But you said earlier that even Technicolor wasn't perfect.
All right.
It wasn't just about capturing colors as they were in real life.
You're right. One of the most common misconceptions about Technicolor.
Is that it was all about realism.
Yeah.
But if you watch enough Technicolor films, you start to notice something interesting.
Okay.
The colors are often heightened, exaggerated, almost dreamlike.
You know, now that you mention it,
Think about The Wizard of Oz. Those emerald greens, the ruby slippers.
they're almost too vibrant to be real.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, those color choices.
Right.
They weren't accidents. They were deliberate artistic decisions.
The filmmakers were using color to create a mood to transport you to a fantastical world.
Wow. So even with a technology as advanced as Technicolor was for its time,
It still came down to those artistic choices.
the filmmakers using color to tell their stories in a specific way.
Absolutely.
And remember that concept of material aesthetics we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, even with Technicolor, the film stock itself played a role in the final look.
The dyes, the way they reacted with the film base, it all contributed to that signature Technicolor aesthetic.
It's like even with all this technology, there's still this human element, this collaboration between the filmmaker, the tools, and the materials themselves.
But it wasn't all fantastical colors and musicals, right?
Didn't you say Technicolor had its limitations?
It did. Remember how we talked about early film stock?
Having that warm amber tone.
Yeah.
Well, Technicolor, even the 3-strip process.
Wasn't great at capturing subtle details and shadows or really dark scenes.
So what did filmmakers do? Just avoid those types of scenes altogether.
That's where things get really interesting. Those limitations actually forced filmmakers to get creative.
They couldn't always rely on perfect color reproduction, so they started playing with lighting techniques.
So limitations sparking innovation.
I love that. Tell me more about these lighting tricks. What were they doing?
Well, one technique that became synonymous with Technicolor was mood lighting. They'd use colored gels over the lights to create very specific moods or atmospheres.
Even in scenes that weren't brightly colored.
Oh, so it wasn't just about what colors they were capturing?
But how they were using light to paint those colors onto the scene itself.
That's so cool. Are there any films where this is really obvious?
Where you can almost feel the filmmakers playing with light and color.
Tons of them.
But a great example is Gone with the Wind. The filmmakers wanted to evoke this sense of epic romance, and they used Technicolor and mood lighting to achieve that.
Think of Scarlett standing in the red-tinged sunset.
Or the warm, inviting glow of Tar's plantation home.
Those were all carefully crafted choices.
Okay, now I'm picturing it, and I can totally see how those lighting choices...
But it's a completely different feeling than just, say, filming those same scenes with natural light.
Exactly. And the funny thing is,
Those techniques, those innovations born out of the limitations of Technicolor.
Yeah.
They didn't just impact musicals and romantic dramas, they actually ended up having a huge influence on a genre you might not expect.
Oh,
Film noir.
film noir. Those dark, shadowy detective stories.
But I thought those were mostly in black and white.
A lot of them were. But even the black and white films,
The influence of Technicolor's lighting techniques is undeniable.
those dramatic contrasts, the pools of light and shadow, the use of light and dark to create mood and suspense. Those are all elements that Technicolor filmmakers had to master.
To work around the limitations of the process. And those techniques ended up shaping the visual language of film noir,
Wow.
even when it was in black and white.
So Technicolor's legacy extends even beyond those colorful films it's known for.
It's like its influence seeped into so many other genres and filmmaking styles.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even when something seems niche or specific to a certain type of film,
Its impact can be far broader than we realize.
that's so true. But as much as I love this trip down memory lane with Technicolor,
I know it wasn't the end of the story. Eventually, new players entered the scene, right? Eastman Color, Agfa Color.
right,
These are names I'll admit I didn't know much about before this deep dive.
you're right.
As influential as Technicolor was, its reign didn't last forever.
And those new names you mentioned, they represent a seismic shift in how color film was made.
Okay, I'm ready for my mind to be blown again. What made Eastman Color and its counterparts so revolutionary? Okay, so before we went to this last week, we were about to go down this rabbit hole of Eastman Color and Agfa Color. You were saying this was a total game changer.
Not just a different name for basically the same thing.
It's night and day, really.
Okay.
Think about what we've learned about Technicolor.
Ingenious for its time, but also incredibly complex and expensive.
Yeah.
3 strips of film.
Those dye transfer matrices.
Right.
It was a whole production
Yeah, like a work of art in itself.
just to get to the final film.
Exactly.
But Eastman Color and those later processes, they flipped the script.
Okay.
Instead of all those mechanical steps, they relied on chemistry.
Chemistry. You have to break this down for me.
I'm more of a watch the pretty colors kind of film buff.
Fair enough. Basically with Eastman Color.
The dyes that create the color,
Yeah.
they were formed during the film developing process.
Okay.
It's a bit technical, but...
Imagine it like this, one of those instant photos where the image magically appears,
Oh, yeah. Like Polaroids. We used to shake them.
which you weren't supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
But still,
Yeah.
it's not exactly the same, but there's a similar idea.
Of the chemicals doing their thing to bring out the image, with Eastman Color, the dyes were part of that chemical reaction.
Happening as the film developed. No more separate strips, no more complex printing.
So way more efficient.
Kind of like the difference between, I don't know, handwriting a letter.
Versus just hitting print on your computer.
Perfect analogy.
And just like the printing press revolutionized books, Eastman Color revolutionized filmmaking.
Wow.
Suddenly, color was accessible to more people, more budgets.
It wasn't just for the big Hollywood studios anymore.
Which is huge. It probably changed the types of stories.
That we're being told too, right?
Yeah.
If you're not limited by this expensive, complicated color process.
Suddenly you can experiment more.
You got it. And it wasn't just about access either.
The look of Eastman Color was different too. Maybe not as intensely saturated as Technicolor.
But there's this vibrancy, a certain luminosity to a lot of films shot on Eastman Color stock.
Okay.
And they could capture finer details, handle brighter scenes better than Technicolor could.
Okay, now I'm really picturing the difference.
It's like imagine a lush romantic scene from a Technicolor musical,
Right.
maybe with those rich reds and blues. Then compare it to something shot on Eastman Color a bit later.
Maybe a gritty drama set in a brightly lit city. Both beautiful, but in totally different ways.
You've spot on.
Eastman Color had this way of capturing a certain realism even in heightened situations.
It felt more immediate, more connected to the world we see.
It's making me want to go back and watch a bunch of films from that era.
See if I can spot the difference. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
But I know there's always a but coming, right? It can't all be sunshine and roses.
You know me too well.
And you're right, the timeline of historical film colors website, it actually goes into this.
Okay.
Those dyes used in Eastman Color and a lot of those later films.
They weren't as stable as everyone thought.
Yeah.
Over time, they can fade.
Wait, so those gorgeous colors we're talking about, they could just...
Disappear.
I know, it's heartbreaking.
A lot of those iconic films from the 50s, 60s, even into the 70s,
Wow.
they're at risk. It's a race against time for film archivists to preserve them digitally before those colors are gone for good.
Man, and I thought I had trouble keeping my old photo albums from fading.
This is on a whole other level.
But it's not as simple as just scanning them right.
Okay.
Because of the fading, you can't just trust what the scanner
You're
sees.
getting it.
It takes real detective work. Archivists have to analyze the specific dyes, understand how they faded,
Oh.
and then use that knowledge to digitally restore the film as close to its original color as possible.
It's like they're not just technicians.
They're color historians and artists themselves.
They really are. And they don't just look at the film in isolation either.
They do their research. They look at costumes, set design, even production notes from the time.
To try and understand the original artistic intent, what colors should those costumes have been? Was the lighting supposed to be warm or cool?
Right.
It's amazing work.
It makes you realize how much goes into preserving these films.
Not just for us, but for future generations.
Yeah.
It's a whole field.
Most people don't even know about. This whole deep dive has been amazing.
But let's bring it back to someone listening right now.
Maybe grabbing their popcorn about to watch a movie.
Yeah.
Why should any of this matter to them?
That's the million-dollar question. And I think, honestly, it comes down to appreciation.
Understanding the history of color in film, all these struggles and triumphs, it's like getting a peek behind the curtain.
Right. Like, you can enjoy a movie without knowing any of this.
Right.
But once you understand the how and the why behind those colors...
It adds a whole other layer to the experience.
Exactly.
It's like knowing a painter's brushstrokes.
Or a musician's favorite instrument. It deepens your understanding and enjoyment. Plus, it makes you think about those colors differently.
Whether it's a classic film or even something made today.
It's like a secret code has been unlocked.
Suddenly you're noticing things you might have missed before.
Thinking about color not just as something pretty.
But as an active part of the storytelling.
That's exactly it. And you know the next time you're frustrated with your phone.
Because the latest filter isn't quite right,
Yeah.
you can think back on these stories.
We've come a long way from hand-painting individual frames of film.
No kidding.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered the spectrum from those earliest experiments.
To the challenges of preserving color in the digital age,
We have.
it's been a wild ride.
It has.
Any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Just this.
The next time you're watching a movie, old or new.
Take a moment to really see the colors. Think about the stories they're telling, the emotions they evoke. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Love that. Until next time, keep it colorful, folks.